"Tyler, why are you throwing out my clothes? Those are my favorites!" I exclaimed, voice sharp as I watched him toss my beloved denim jacket into a box marked Donate. Tyler glanced up, a smirk curling his lips. "Jenna, you don't need so many things. I'm decluttering for both of us. Trust me, you'll thank me later." I stood there, stunned. My husband of 10 years had never behaved like this before. We lived a pretty average life in our suburban home. I worked as a graphic designer. Tyler had a stable job in IT. Our life wasn't perfect, but it was comfortable. But standing in our cluttered bedroom, which Tyler was transforming into a museum of minimalism, I felt anything but comfortable. "You're kidding, right?" I asked, hoping to see a glimmer of a joke in his eyes. But he was dead serious. "No, Jenna, it's time for a change. We have too much unnecessary stuff. It's suffocating." "Suffocating? Are you listening to yourself? Those are my belongings. You can't just throw them away." My voice wavered between anger and disbelief. Tyler shrugged, continuing to sort through my things. "I've been reading about minimalism. It's supposed to clear our minds, reduce stress." "Whose mind? Your mind? I need my things, Tyler. I use them." I tried to pull my jacket from the pile, but he held it firmly. "Relax, Jenna. You'll see. This is for the best." Infuriated, I walked out of the bedroom and into my office. I needed space away from his crazy new obsession. As I sat at my desk, I stared at my computer, trying to work, but my thoughts blazed with anger. What had gotten into him? Tyler's sudden interest in minimalism clashed with everything about our daily life. I loved our cozy, cluttered home filled with memories, the trinkets from our travels, the art supplies scattered around, the bookshelf overflowing with stories. It was part of who I was. That night, lying in bed, I turned to Tyler. "I don't appreciate you making these decisions without me. We need to respect each other's things." He turned to face me, that infuriating smirk replaced by determination. "You'll see, Jenna. Soon you'll understand." I turned away, pulling the covers tightly around me, seething quietly. If he thought I was just going to sit by and watch him discard my life, he was mistaken. The next morning, I found more of my things gone. The books I'd been reading, my favorite coffee mug from college, even the houseplants I loved tending had vanished. I wandered through our home that was rapidly becoming a sterile, soulless space. Confronting Tyler in the living room, I struggled to keep my voice calm. "Tyler, we've got to talk. This has to stop." He put down his minimalist guide and met my gaze. "Jenna, in time you'll appreciate this. It's for our mental clarity." Was he kidding? Mental clarity? I felt on the edge of snapping. "This isn't about clarity. It's about control, Tyler. Stop treating me like I don't matter." His eyes flared, but he didn't reply. The silence stretched, thick with tension. As the days went by, the house grew emptier, and my anger grew. Tyler's dismissive attitude only added fuel to the fire gnawing at my patience. Something had to give, but for now I felt cornered, constantly grappling with the loss and the turmoil he brought into our once contented home. The struggle for control loomed large, and I knew I had to find a way to reclaim my space, my peace, and my sanity. But how? I woke up with a sense of unease, knowing I had an important project deadline. As I reached for my tablet and stylus, my heart sank. They were gone. Frantically, I searched around my office, the drawer, the desk, even the bookshelf. Nothing. "Tyler!" I screamed, storming into the kitchen where he sat sipping his morning coffee. He looked up with that same smirk. "Morning, Jenna, what's the panic? My work tools, my tablet, my stylus, my sketchpad, where are they?" I demanded, feeling my heartbeat in my throat. He leaned back, looking entirely too pleased with himself. "I hid them. You need to focus on real life, not on screens." "Are you out of your mind?" I shouted, anger making my words sharp. "I need those for my job, Tyler. This isn't some hobby. It's how I pay the bills." He shrugged nonchalantly. "You're too dependent on these things. I did this for your own good." My fists clenched. "For my own good? You're sabotaging my work. Give them back now." "Not until you calm down and realize I'm right," he said, standing up and crossing his arms. Desperation clawed at my insides. I didn't have time for this. My deadline was looming, and every minute without my tools was another nail in the coffin of my professional reputation. "Where did you put them?" I asked, my voice breaking. "There are more important things than your deadlines, Jenna. Trust me, this is tough love," he said, making me feel like a child being scolded. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my car keys and left the house, driving aimlessly just to clear my head. I ended up at a coffee shop, trying to figure out how to salvage my project. But without my tools, I was helpless. Hours passed, and I knew I'd never make the deadline. My client's messages went from concerned to irate. Back home, Tyler sat watching TV, unbothered by the chaos he'd caused. "Are you ready to admit you're too consumed by technology?" he asked when I walked in. "I missed my deadline," I said flatly, my voice hollow. "Maybe it's a wake-up call," he replied, eyes still glued to the screen. "Tyler, you cost me a major project. I could lose my job over this," I said, fighting back tears. He finally looked at me. "You're overreacting. One project isn't going to end your career. It's all part of the process of simplifying our lives." I couldn't believe his arrogance. "You just don't get it, do you?" I felt a wave of hopelessness crash over me. Days later, the fallout from missing that deadline hit. I received an email from my boss, expressing severe disappointment and hinting that my future projects would be closely scrutinized. My career, something I'd worked so hard to build, was now hanging by a thread, all because of Tyler's absurd obsession. I cornered Tyler as he was sorting through another box of my belongings. "This stops now, Tyler. If you touch anything else, we're done." He laughed, not taking me seriously. "You love me too much to leave, Jenna." Rage and despair mingled inside me. "We'll see," I whispered, more to myself than to him. The days that followed were tense. Tyler continued his minimalist crusade, ignoring my warnings. Our home, once filled with my creative energy, now felt like a battleground. The man I married was gone, replaced by someone I no longer recognized. And as much as I hated the thought, I knew I had to fight back. But how? Margaret's advice replayed in my mind. Maybe it was time for a new strategy. I woke up to another day in our increasingly empty house. As I went to grab breakfast, I noticed my favorite coffee mug was gone. Again. "Tyler," I called out, but he was nowhere to be found. Instead, piles of items marked for donation cluttered the living room. Books, frames, even my art supplies. "Tyler, you better not have touched my things again," I yelled, my voice echoing through the silent house. Entering my office, the sinking feeling hit me before I fully saw the damage. My art supplies, the brushes, the paints, the canvases, gone. Just a blank, sterile space where creativity used to live. Panic and fury swept over me. Tyler walked in with a smug look. "Morning, Jenna. You seem tense." "You've gone too far this time," I said, my voice shaking. "Where are my art supplies?" "Gone. You're better off without them," he said calmly, as if discussing the weather. I stormed towards him, my anger boiling over. "You had no right. Those were important to me. They were irreplaceable." "You need to let go," he said, his tone devoid of empathy. "Let go of what? My passion? My career? You're destroying everything I care about." "Sometimes destruction is needed for renewal," he said, still infuriatingly calm. Calm was the last thing I felt. Breathing heavily, I decided I couldn't reason with him. I walked out, slamming the door behind me. It was time to call Marissa. At the coffee shop, I met Marissa, who instantly saw the desperation on my face. "Jenna, what's going on?" "Tyler's gone completely off the deep end. He's thrown out nearly everything I own," I said, barely holding back tears. She reached across the table and took my hand. "That's it. We're doing something about this." "But what can we do? He doesn't listen to reason." Marissa thought for a moment. "Document everything. Photograph, record, build evidence. Then we'll figure out how to hit him where it hurts." "How do I even start?" "Start with whatever he throws out next," she said firmly, "and don't let him see you do it." The plan was bold, but I felt a spark of hope. "All right, I'll do it." Returning home, Tyler eyed me with suspicion. "Where did you go?" "Just needed some air," I muttered, avoiding his gaze. Over the next few days, I carefully documented everything he discarded. The photographs, the videos, hidden carefully in places he wouldn't find. I made sure to keep a record of how his actions disrupted every facet of my life. Meanwhile, Tyler continued his rampage, unknowingly walking into my trap. The breaking point came one evening when I discovered him holding my mother's jewelry box. "No," I screamed, lunging towards him. "Not that, Tyler. Please, not that." He looked at me, eyes cold. "It's just stuff, Jenna." "That's my mother's, Tyler. It's all I have left of her," I pleaded, tears streaming down my face. His expression didn't change. "You need to learn to let go." "That's it, Tyler. If you toss that, we're done. Do you hear me? Done!" I shouted, my voice echoing off the bare walls. Marissa entered the scene, a fierce look on her face. "Tyler, stop," she commanded. "Throw that out, and you'll regret it." He hesitated, then smirked. "Too late for that," he said, tossing the box into the garbage bin. My heart shattered. The final, irrevocable act. I looked at Marissa, who nodded. It was time for the next phase of our plan. I walked away, finalizing my resolve. Now it was my turn to teach Tyler a lesson he'd never forget. I stared at the garbage bin, the final resting place of my mother's jewelry. The pain was overwhelming, but it solidified my resolve. I needed an escape, a real plan for my future without Tyler. That evening, I met up with Marissa in her cozy, cluttered apartment. It was a sharp contrast to my now barren home. "I can't live like this anymore," I said, my voice shaky. Marissa nodded. "I know. I've been thinking, Jenna. You need a plan." "What kind of plan?" I asked, sipping the coffee she handed me. "First, you need to make him think you've accepted his lifestyle. Stop fighting him. Let him believe you're on his side. Meanwhile, prepare your exit strategy." "Exit strategy?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yes. Document everything, keep a record, and start putting away money quietly. You'll need it for when you leave." I took a deep breath. "All right, I'll do it." The next day, I began pretending to go along with Tyler's minimalist fantasy. "You're right, Tyler," I said over dinner. "Maybe we do need less stuff." He looked pleased, almost smug. "I knew you'd see it my way, Jenna." Meanwhile, I documented every unsupportable action, every violation of my privacy, every discarded belonging. I used my hidden savings to consult a lawyer, making sure I knew my rights. Weeks went by and Tyler sold off even more of our things under the guise of making our lives better. "I put the couch up online," he said one evening as I returned from Marissa's. "The couch?" I asked, trying to mask my growing irritation. "Yeah, we can get a couple of chairs instead. Less is more, right?" he said with a condescending smile. "Less is more," I echoed, forcing a smile. Inside, my resolve solidified. Around the same time, I noticed Tyler making plans to sell more of my beloved art supplies and personal items. "Thinking of listing some more of your paints," he said offhandedly one morning. With a mental note, I added this to my growing pile of evidence. My secret revenge was close, and I felt a surge of confidence. Each day I felt stronger, more in control, knowing Tyler's arrogance would soon come crashing down. Tyler was oblivious, flush with arrogance. He didn't notice my growing distance, the way I no longer argued. He didn't notice me strategically placing cameras and taking notes. His confidence was his blindfold, and I used it to my advantage. One night, he came into the living room holding a box of my old letters and cards. "Do we really need to keep these old things?" he asked, not even waiting for an answer before heading to the trash bin. "Go ahead," I said casually, hiding the pain. Inside, I reminded myself this was temporary. This destruction would end soon. Marissa and I met regularly, meticulously planning every step. "He thinks you're on board," she said during one of our meetings. "This is good. Keep it up." "I will," I promised, determination pulsing through me. Tyler's arrogance made it easy. He continued his rampage, assuming I was finally seeing the wisdom of his ways. But every step he took to simplify our lives pushed him further into his downfall. My documentations grew, painting a picture of his complete disregard for me and everything we built together. The countdown had begun. Every discarded item, every condescending smile, every moment of arrogance fed into the plan. I was ready. He was unknowingly forging the path to his own ruin, and soon, very soon, he would face the consequences of underestimating me. I took a deep breath, knowing that my revenge was inching closer. Tyler's world would implode, and from the wreckage, I'd rise stronger than ever. Every morning felt like a new opportunity to gather more evidence. I stealthily cataloged Tyler's increasingly outrageous actions, frequently pausing my routine to photograph or record him. The house was no longer a home, but a battleground I had mapped out meticulously. One afternoon, Tyler came home, elated. "Jenna, guess what?" he announced, grinning as if he just won the lottery. "What is it?" I asked, feigning interest. "I sold the car, took it straight to the junkyard," he said proudly. I felt a surge of anger but masked it with a smile. "Really? And how are we supposed to get around now?" "Oh, we can make do. Use public transport. Walk. It's better for the environment," he said smugly. Inside, I was seething. The car had been another line crossed, another proof of his disregard. I secretly recorded his announcement, adding it to my growing collection of evidence. My escape fund was steadily growing, and the pieces of my plan were falling into place. Marissa and I sat down that evening, going through the documentation. "You're doing great, Jenna. Just a bit longer, and you'll have all you need," she encouraged. "I just need to stay focused," I replied, determination in my voice. Later, Tyler continued his spree by selling off more of the furniture. "We can live a simple life with the essentials," he said, pretending to be wise. "I've got some buyers for the dining table and chairs." Anger simmered, but I nodded, playing my part. "I suppose you're right. Less is more." Over the next few days, Tyler's arrogance peaked. He never asked, never second-guessed his decisions, always convinced of his righteousness. He even proudly shared his minimalist philosophy with our friends, receiving mixed reactions. "You're ruining Jenna's life," Marissa snapped at one such gathering. "This isn't minimalism, it's madness." Tyler only chuckled. "You'll understand eventually. Jenna, tell them how much better things are now." I forced a smile. "It's a big adjustment, but I'm starting to see the benefits." In reality, each declaration solidified my resolve. His downfall would be both swift and brutal. My lawyer had prepared everything for the divorce, ensuring my financial security and protection. I discussed final preparations with Marissa, fine-tuning the public revelation of Tyler's actions. One night, Marissa and I set up hidden cameras throughout the house, positioning them to capture Tyler's every arrogant move. We ensured they were discreet, undetectable. Tyler, none the wiser, continued his tirade unchecked. The final straw came when Tyler decided to sell my laptop, the one lifeline to my work. "It's a distraction," he argued, "keeping you tied to the old ways." I listed my rejection in silent screams, recording him listing it online. "Sure, Tyler, go ahead," I managed weakly, inside burning with fury. Marissa met me outside that night. "Tomorrow, Jenna. We release the footage tomorrow." I nodded, a mix of anxiety and anticipation churning within. "I'm ready." The next morning, Tyler beamed with unearned pride. "I've arranged for the final pickup. Soon we'll be truly free." I smiled, hiding my true feelings. The footage would go live today. I pressed the button, releasing the carefully edited clips of Tyler's increasingly erratic behavior online. Within hours, our little suburban nightmare started to spread like wildfire. Calls started pouring in. Tyler's phone buzzed nonstop. Confused and frustrated, he turned to me. "What's happening?" "You're finally facing the consequences, Tyler," I said, watching his expression shift from confusion to horror. Our life as he knew it was about to implode, and I felt a sense of justice finally taking form. I had steps to take, legal papers to file, a future to reclaim. What came next was his downfall, a consequence he never saw coming. Tyler's phone buzzed incessantly as the footage circulated online. He looked bewildered, flipping through calls and messages. The smirk that had become a permanent fixture on his face was gone, replaced by a taut scowl. "What is happening, Jenna?" Tyler snapped, eyes narrowing. I met his gaze, feeling a wave of satisfaction. "The world is seeing your minimalist lifestyle for what it really is, Tyler." Confusion turned to rage. "You did this? You filmed me?" "You left me no choice. You've dismantled my life piece by piece," I said calmly. "Now everyone knows." He stormed into the living room, flipping through the channels. Every news segment, every website showed his face, his actions, our story. His drastic measures narrated with clips of his irrational behavior for all to see. "You're ruining me," he yelled, grabbing the remote with a white-knuckled grip. "No, Tyler, you ruined yourself. I just exposed the truth," I replied, feeling a rush of long-overdue empowerment. The doorbell rang, and I opened it to find Marissa. She looked at Tyler, then back at me. "It's spreading everywhere, Jenna. His actions, his words, it's all out in the open." Tyler lunged toward her, rage emanating from him. "You're in on this, too?" Marissa stood her ground. "You deserve every bit of this, Tyler. No one should have to live under your tyranny." Tyler's phone buzzed with a new notification, and his face paled as he read. "I just lost my promotion. They don't want someone with mental instability at the helm." "You brought this on yourself," I said, feeling a mix of justice and relief. In a fit of anger, Tyler threw his phone across the room, shattering it against the wall. "You've torn everything apart." "No, Tyler, you did," I said coldly. "And now it's time I move on." Marissa handed me an envelope, heavy with legal papers. "You might want to read these, Tyler." He ripped it open, the furious look on his face turning to shock as he read through the divorce papers. Divorce? You're divorcing me? You gave me no other option, I said, my voice steady. This isn't over, he screamed, his face contorted with fury. Oh, it's over, Marissa countered. You have nothing left to control. Tyler slumped onto the debris of our once cozy living room. Where will you go? He asked, voice tinged with desperation. Wherever I choose, I replied, feeling a sense of liberation wash over me. And for the first time in a long time, I'll be free. With that, I walked out the door, Marissa by my side. Tyler's life had shattered into pieces he could never fix. His public persona was tainted, his career in shambles. What once felt like a life trapped in shadows now felt open, filled with possibilities and light. Marissa and I walked towards the future. Tyler's pleas echoed faintly behind us, but I didn't look back. The home I once loved became symbolic of his downfall, a testament to the strength I discovered within myself. You did it, Marissa said, giving my hand a squeeze. We did it, I corrected, grateful for her unwavering support. I knew the road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in a long time, it felt like my own. One filled with opportunities that no amount of Tyler's tyranny could ever take away. Tyler's pleas faded as Marissa and I walked away from the house. For the first time in ages, I felt an overwhelming sense of freedom. But the feeling was mixed with a sobering awareness of the path ahead. The next few days were a whirlwind. I had legal meetings, packed the few possessions Tyler hadn't managed to sell, and started building my new life. Tyler, on the other hand, was unraveling. I received messages from mutual friends, all detailing the chaos. He's not doing well, one said. He's a mess, added another. While part of me felt satisfaction, another part expected it. One evening, as I was settling into Marissa's spare room, my phone buzzed. Tyler's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated, then answered. Jenna, he said, his voice cracking. I'm sorry, please come back. We can fix this. There's nothing to fix, Tyler. This is the consequence of your actions, I replied firmly. I've lost everything, my job, my reputation. You've taken it all away. No, Tyler, you did this to yourself. Maybe it's time you face that. He was silent for a moment. Is there really no way back? No, Tyler, there isn't, I said, feeling a strange mix of pity and resolve. Goodbye. I hung up, feeling a sense of closure. Tyler was a chapter I was ready to close. The focus was now on rebuilding. A week later, I received a call from an old client. Jenna, we heard about what happened. We want to help you get back on your feet. Are you interested in a new project? Excitement fluttered in my chest. Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity. I plunged into work, rediscovering my passion for graphic design. With Marissa's support, I also started rekindling connections with old clients and colleagues. Slowly, my professional life began to flourish. Meanwhile, Tyler's situation continued to deteriorate. Friends sent updates. He's lost the house, one messaged. He's staying with his brother now. Another informed. Tyler was experiencing the full brunt of the consequences he had set in motion. I focused on my new beginning. Months passed, and I moved into a small apartment downtown. It wasn't much, but it was mine, filled with things I chose. No one would ever dictate my peace again. One afternoon, as I worked on a new project, a familiar number flashed on my phone. Tyler's brother, Dan. Jenna, can you talk? Dan asked, sounding weary. Sure, Dan. What's going on? I replied cautiously. It's Tyler. He's hit rock bottom. He needs help. I sighed, a part of me still feeling a pang of old familiarity. What kind of help? He needs to understand what he did. He's talking to a therapist, but hearing it from you might help. I considered it. I'll think about it, Dan, but right now I need to focus on my own healing. Of course. Just thought you should know, Dan said before hanging up. Setting the phone down, I took a deep breath. Tyler's spiral was no longer my concern. I had a fresh canvas in front of me, both in my work and my life. Marissa and I celebrated my first big project post-Tyler. Over drinks, she looked at me and smiled. You did it, Jenna. You got your life back. And I couldn't have done it without you, I replied, gratitude filling my voice. We toasted to new beginnings, to resilience, to the strength it took to reclaim my life. Tyler's downfall was complete, but my journey was just beginning. And with every step, I felt more and more like the person I was always meant to be. The divorce was finalized without much more drama. The emotional weight lifted with the final signatures, and I felt a sense of freedom I hadn't known in years. I moved into my new apartment downtown. It was small, but filled with everything I loved. The walls adorned with art, the shelves stacked with books, and a cozy workspace for my graphic design projects. It was my sanctuary. On my first night alone, Marissa came over with a bottle of champagne. "Here's to new beginnings," she said, raising her glass. "To new beginnings," I echoed, clinking glasses. We laughed and talked until the early hours, the future feeling bright and promising. The next few weeks flew by. I dove into my work, reconnecting with old clients and gaining new ones. The satisfaction of rebuilding my career brought a sense of accomplishment. Each new project became a testament to my resilience. One afternoon, I received a call from Olivia Lane, Marissa's sister. "Jenna, I have a client who needs a top-notch graphic designer. Are you free to discuss?" "Absolutely," I replied, feeling a mix of excitement and gratitude. This connection could open doors I hadn't even considered. Meeting Olivia's client went better than I imagined. They were impressed with my portfolio and enthusiasm. Landing the project felt like validation for everything I endured and overcame. A new chapter was unfolding, and I was ready for it. Meanwhile, I've heard sporadic updates about Tyler. Mutual friends mentioned he was still struggling, his life dismantled, much like what he had done to mine. He moved in with his brother, barely scraping by. He reached out a few more times, apologies intermixed with pleading, but I kept my distance. The door to that part of my life was permanently closed. During a dinner with Marissa, she looked at me with a smile. "You know, you're glowing." I laughed. "Am I? I guess it's the new freedom, the chance to build my life the way I want." "You deserve every bit of happiness," she said, raising her glass again. "To us," I said, taking a sip. Life continued to improve. I settled into a new routine, balancing work and personal time, reconnecting with old friends, indulging in hobbies I had abandoned, art, reading, even taking a new dance class. One afternoon, while sketching at a local park, I ran into an old colleague. "Jenna, is that you?" I looked up, smiling. "It is. How have you been?" Catching up felt nostalgic and refreshing. We talked about future collaborations, sharing ideas and possibilities. My network grew, bringing new opportunities and collaborations. Despite everything, Tyler's shadow lingered. He was a lesson, a reminder of what could happen when one person tries to dominate another. But instead of anger, I felt a strange sense of pity. He had lost everything through his own actions and was now paying the price. One morning, I received a package. Inside was the jewelry box Tyler had thrown out, carefully restored. No note, but I knew it was from Marissa. Tears welled up as I held it, feeling a closure I didn't know I needed. That weekend, Marissa and I went out to celebrate. We danced, laughed, and wondered about the future. The weight had lifted, replaced by hope and excitement. Standing on my apartment balcony that night, looking out at the city lights, I felt a deep sense of peace. Life had thrown curveballs, but I had come out stronger. Revenge wasn't sweet, but justice. Finding my voice and reclaiming my life, that was the real victory. As I prepared for bed, I glanced at a small mirror by my bedside. The reflection showed not just someone who survived, but someone who thrived, someone who embraced every new day with gratitude and a sense of purpose. Tomorrow was another chance to build, to create, to live fully, and I was ready for it. "You're overreacting as always. Can't you just get over it and move on?" Bryce's dismissive words hit me like a slap across the face. I stared at him in disbelief, my chest tightening as the all-too-familiar frustration boiled within me. How many times had I pleaded with him to understand what I was going through with my health issues? How many nights did I cry myself to sleep, longing for his compassion and support? "Get over it," I echoed, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Bryce, I'm in constant pain. The fatigue is crippling. I can't just get over a chronic condition that modern medicine still doesn't fully comprehend." Bryce rolled his eyes, his expression a mixture of annoyance and indifference. Yeah, I've heard it all before. You really need to stop using that as an excuse for everything." My hands trembled as a wave of anger washed over me. An excuse? Did he truly believe I was making up the suffering I endured day after day, year after year? "You know what? I'm done," I said, my voice quivering with pent-up emotion. "I'm done trying to make you understand something you clearly have no interest in comprehending." Bryce scoffed and turned his attention back to the television. effectively dismissing me and my struggles once again. I stormed out of the living room, fighting back tears of frustration and hurt. As I made my way to the bedroom, memories of our once loving relationship flooded my mind. Where was the man who had vowed to love and support me through sickness and health? The one who had held me close and promised to always be by my side? That man was long gone, replaced by this shell of a person who seemed to care more about maintaining the perfect facade than truly being there for his wife. I collapsed onto the bed, burying my face in the pillow as sobs racked my body. How had we come to this? How had the love and understanding we once shared disintegrated into this bitter, toxic dynamic? As I lay there, a newfound determination took root within me. I couldn't continue living like this, constantly invalidated and disrespected by the person who was supposed to be my partner in life. Enough was enough. I sat up, wiping away the tears, and reached for the journal I had been keeping over the past few years. With trembling hands, I began to document this latest incident, determined to gather evidence of Bryce's emotional abuse. The dismissive comments, the lack of empathy, the constant belittling of my struggles, I would record it all. This would be the start of my journey towards reclaiming my dignity and self-worth. I would no longer be a victim, cowering in the face of Bryce's cruelty. It was time to take a stand, to expose the truth, and to seek justice for the years of pain and neglect I had endured. The words flowed from my pen, fueled by a potent mix of anger, heartache, and a newfound sense of resolve. This was the final straw, the catalyst for the upheaval that was about to unfold. I was done being the silent, suffering wife. It was time for Bryce to face the consequences of his actions. I should have seen the signs earlier, but love can blind even the most perceptive of souls. Bryce and I had been a perfect match in the beginning, two kindred spirits, united in our hopes and dreams for the future. We'd feed off each other's energy, our laughter filling the air as we built the foundation of what we thought would be an unbreakable bond. How naive I had been. The first crack appeared shortly after our wedding, when I began exhibiting strange symptoms that no doctor could properly diagnose. The debilitating fatigue, the widespread pain, the cognitive issues. They all remained an unsolvable mystery, an invisible enemy waging war on my body and mind. At first, Bryce was sympathetic, assuring me that we would get through this together. In sickness and in health, remember, he would say, holding me close as I cried from the frustration of not understanding what was happening to me. Those tender moments became rarer as the years passed, and my condition only worsened. Bryce grew increasingly distant, frustrated by the lack of a clear solution. His patience wore thin, and the man I had fallen in love with slowly faded away, replaced by someone cold and callous. "Quit making excuses and pull yourself together," he snapped one day when I struggled to complete a simple household chore. "You're letting this supposed illness control your life." Yeah, I tried to explain, to make him understand the genuine anguish I was experiencing, but he would hear none of it. In his eyes, I had become a burden, a blight on the perfect life he had envisioned for us. Outward appearances meant everything to Bryce. He couldn't bear the thought of our family being perceived as anything less than perfect, even as our son Derek grew increasingly aware of the turmoil brewing beneath the surface. "Why is Dad always so angry with you?" Derek asked me once, his eyes full of concern. I forced a smile, not wanting to tarnish his image of his father. "It's nothing, sweetheart. He's just under a lot of stress at work." The lies piled up, each one a brick in the facade Bryce was so desperate to maintain. We were the perfect family, with the perfect house and the perfect life. At least, that's what we wanted the world to believe. Behind closed doors, the reality was far more sinister. "You're pathetic, you know that?" Bryce snarled at me one evening after I had spent the day bedridden, too weak and in too much pain to function. "This is just a convenient way for you to be lazy and avoid your responsibilities." His words cut deeper than any knife, reopening the wounds of inadequacy that his emotional abuse had inflicted over the years. I wanted to scream, to hurl every ounce of anguish back in his face, but the strength had long since been drained from me. So I remained silent, my tears the only outward display of the turmoil raging within. That's when I knew the man I had married was gone, consumed by his obsession with maintaining the illusion of perfection. The love and support I had once treasured had been replaced by disdain and contempt, all because I couldn't meet his warped expectations. In that moment, a small spark of defiance ignited within me, a glimmer of determination that would grow into an all-consuming blaze. I wouldn't stay trapped in this toxic cycle any longer. One way or another, I would strip away Bryce's carefully constructed facade and expose the ugliness that festered beneath. He would face the consequences of his actions, of the years of emotional torment he had inflicted upon me. The road ahead would be arduous, but I knew in my heart that it was the only path to reclaiming my dignity and self-worth. The mask of perfection would shatter, and the truth would finally be laid bare, no matter the cost. The facade Bryce had so carefully constructed was beginning to crumble. As my health deteriorated further, it became impossible for me to keep up the charade of being the perfect wife and homemaker. Simple tasks like cooking and cleaning left me utterly drained, my body feeling like a leadweight that refused to cooperate. Of course, this only added fuel to Bryce's disdain. "What's the point of having you around if you can't even take care of basic household duties?" he sneered, surveying the pile of unwashed dishes in the sink. I wanted to explain, to make him understand the sheer effort it took for me just to get through each day, but I knew it would fall on deaf ears. Bryce had made up his mind about my condition long ago. In his eyes, it was nothing more than a convenient excuse. "I'm sorry," I mustered, hating how weak and defeated I sounded. "I'll try harder, I promise." Bryce scoffed and shook his head in disgust. "Save your empty promises. You've been trying harder for years, yet nothing ever changes." The venom in his words cut deep, but I remained silent, too emotionally and physically drained to engage in another fruitless argument. As the weeks passed, Bryce's insults and complaints escalated, each one chipping away at what little self-worth I had left. I found solace in my journal, pouring out the anguish and frustration that I couldn't voice aloud. It was during one of these writing sessions that Derek knocked on my bedroom door, a concerned look etched on his face. "Mom, are you okay? I heard Dad yelling at you again." I fought back the tears that threatened to spill and forced a reassuring smile. "Everything's fine, honey. Your father's just been under a lot of stress lately." Derek didn't look convinced, but he nodded slowly, his eyes filled with a sadness that no child should ever have to bear. As he left, I couldn't help but wonder how much of Bryce's behavior he had witnessed over the years. Had I been naive in thinking I could shield him from the harsh reality of our crumbling marriage? That night, as Bryce slept soundly beside me, I stayed awake, my mind racing with a newfound determination. I couldn't continue living like this, constantly demeaned and belittled by the man who was supposed to love and cherish me. Enough was enough. I reached for my journal, the pages now filled with a meticulous documentation of Bryce's emotional abuse. Every cutting remark, every dismissive gesture, every act of cruelty laid bare in ink. As I flipped through the pages, a sense of empowerment washed over me. This was my evidence, my ammunition in the battle I was about to wage against the man who had made my life a living hell. I wouldn't be the silent, suffering wife any longer. It was time to take action, to expose Bryce for the monster he had become and seek justice for the years of pain and neglect he had inflicted upon me. The first step would be to confide in my sister, Jenna. She had always been my rock, my unwavering support system through the darkest of times. With her by my side, I knew I would have the strength to face whatever lay ahead. A plan began to form in my mind, the pieces slowly falling into place. I would gather every shred of evidence, every damning proof of Bryce's vile behavior, until I had an airtight case against him. Then, and only then, would I strike, shattering his carefully constructed facade and exposing the ugliness that festered beneath. It would be a long and arduous road, but I was ready to fight. For too long, I had been the victim, cowering in fear and shame. But no more. This time, justice would be mine. Our 20th wedding anniversary should have been a joyous occasion, a celebration of the love and commitment that had carried us through 2 decades of marriage. Instead, it became a painful reminder of how far Bryce and I had drifted apart. He had insisted on going out to an upscale restaurant, wanting to maintain the facade of a happy, successful couple in front of our friends and family. I had reluctantly agreed, knowing full well that any objection on my part would only ignite another heated argument. As I slowly made my way down the stairs, the simple act of getting dressed and ready had left me utterly drained. Bryce was waiting at the bottom, drumming his fingers impatiently against his watch. "It's about time," he grumbled, eyeing my weary appearance with disdain. "We're already running late." I mustered an apologetic smile, too exhausted to offer any excuses. We made our way to the restaurant in silence, the tension between us palpable. The evening only grew more excruciating as it progressed. Bryce basked in the attention of our guests, regaling them with tales of his career successes, while I sat quietly, sipping water to quell the nausea that had taken hold. At one point, our friend Jennifer turned to me with a warm smile. "Marla, you must be so proud of Bryce and everything he's accomplished." Before I could respond, Bryce cut in with a bitter chuckle. "If only she put in half as much effort into our marriage as I do at work." The table fell silent, a collective tension hanging in the air. I felt the blood drain from my face as Bryce's words sank in, each one a dagger to my already fragile heart. "Excuse me?" I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. Bryce shook his head in mock disappointment. "Come on, Marla. We all know you've been using your little condition as an excuse to be lazy and neglect your duties as a wife." The venom in his tone was unmistakable, laying bare the contempt he harbored for me and my struggles. I wanted to scream, to hurl his cruelty back in his face, but the shock had rendered me mute. Our friends and family shifted uncomfortably, averting their gazes as the once celebratory atmosphere turned toxic. No one dared to intervene, to call out Bryce's abhorrent behavior. He leaned back in his chair, a self-satisfied smirk playing on his lips. "See? She can't even defend herself. Pathetic." Those words would haunt me for years to come, searing themselves into my memory like a brand. In that moment, everything became crystallized. The years of emotional abuse, the gaslighting, the utter disregard for my well-being. As I sat there, humiliated and defeated, something within me shifted. A fire ignited in the depths of my soul, a burning rage that had been simmering for far too long. Enough was enough. I would no longer be Bryce's punching bag, his victim to be ridiculed and demeaned at his whim. The gloves were coming off, and I would stop at nothing to bring him to his knees, to make him suffer as he had made me suffer for so long. The rest of the evening passed in a blur, my mind already plotting my vengeance. Bryce continued to revel in his cruelty, oblivious to the storm brewing within me. As we arrived home, I went straight to my room, locking the door behind me. I reached for my journal, my hands trembling, as I began to document every agonizing detail of the night's events. This would be the tipping point, the catalyst that would set my plan into motion. Bryce had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed, and he would pay dearly for his transgressions. I would gather every shred of evidence, every recorded instance of his emotional and psychological torture. Then, when the time was right, I would unleash it all upon him, shattering his world and leaving him to contend with the consequences of his actions. No more suffering in silence, no more being the victim. It was time for Bryce to face the wrath he had so recklessly provoked. In the days following our disastrous anniversary dinner, I could feel a shift taking place within me. The years of pent-up anger and resentment had finally reached a boiling point, igniting a fire that burned with the intensity of 1,000 suns. Bryce, oblivious as ever, carried on as if nothing had happened. He went about his daily routine, leaving for work each morning with a casual "see you later" tossed over his shoulder. Meanwhile, I stewed in my righteous fury, meticulously documenting every instance of his cruelty in my journal. It was during one of these writing sessions that Jenna stopped by unannounced. She took one look at my reddened eyes and the turmoil etched into my features before enveloping me in a tight embrace. "Oh, Marla," she murmured, her voice laced with concern. "What's going on?" I pulled away, steeling myself against the torrent of emotion that threatened to spill forth. "It's Bryce," I began, the words tumbling out in a rush. He humiliated me, Jenna, in front of everyone at our anniversary dinner." Jenna's brow furrowed as I recounted the painful details, her expression darkening with each word. By the time I had finished, her hands were balled into tight fists, trembling with barely contained rage. "That bastard," she hissed, her eyes blazing with a protective fury. "How could he treat you like that? After everything you've been through?" I shook my head, feeling a sudden surge of determination. I can't live like this anymore, Jenna. The emotional abuse, the constant belittling, it has to stop. Jenna nodded, her jaw set in a firm line. You're right. Enough is enough. What are you going to do? A plan had already begun to take shape in my mind, a meticulously crafted blueprint for revenge. I'm going to gather evidence, I explained, my voice steady and resolute. Every recording, every journal entry, every shred of proof of Bryce's cruelty. Then, when the time is right, I'm going to unleash it all and watch his world crumble around him. Jenna's eyes widened, a mixture of shock and admiration flickering across her features. Marla, are you sure about this? This is a nuclear option. There's no going back once you pull the trigger. I nodded, my jaw clenched with grim determination. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Bryce needs to face the consequences of his actions, of the years of emotional torture he's put me through. He needs to be exposed for the monster he truly is. A slow smile spread across Jenna's face, a fierce pride radiating from her very being. Okay, sis, I'm in. Whatever you need, I've got your back. Relief washed over me, knowing that I wouldn't be facing this battle alone. With Jenna by my side, I felt an overwhelming sense of strength, a certainty that I would emerge victorious. Over the next few weeks, we worked tirelessly, gathering every scrap of evidence we could find. Journals, recordings, photographs, nothing was left out. We built an ironclad case against Bryce, one that would leave no room for doubt or denial. As our arsenal grew, so too did my sense of empowerment. The fear and shame that had once shackled me began to dissipate, replaced by a burning desire for justice and retribution. Bryce remained blissfully unaware of the storm brewing, carrying on with his daily routine as if nothing were amiss. He would sneer at me whenever our paths crossed, his lips curling in a contemptuous sneer that only fueled my determination. "What's the matter, Marla?" he would taunt. Still wallowing in self-pity, I see. I would meet his gaze, unflinching, biting back the biting retort that danced on the tip of my tongue. Soon, I told myself. Soon, he would pay for every ounce of pain and humiliation he had inflicted upon me. As the final pieces of our plan fell into place, I felt a sense of exhilaration coursing through my veins. The day of reckoning was fast approaching, and Bryce had no idea what was in store. He had made the mistake of underestimating me, of believing that I would cower and submit to his abuse forever. But no more. This time, I would be the one holding all the cards, and Bryce would learn the true meaning of suffering. The facade he had so carefully constructed was about to come crashing down, and I would be the one wielding the sledgehammer. The day of reckoning had finally arrived, and I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins. Jenna and I had spent weeks meticulously planning every detail, leaving no stone unturned in our quest for justice. It was the annual Wyatt family reunion, a gathering that Bryce had always insisted on attending, despite our crumbling marriage. This year, however, the event would serve as the perfect stage for his downfall. As we pulled into the driveway of my parents' home, I could see the familiar faces of extended family members already gathered on the lawn. Bryce plastered on his usual charming smile, ever the master of deception. "Remember, honey," he murmured, leaning in close, "we have to keep up appearances. No need to burden everyone with our personal issues." I fought back the urge to recoil from his touch, nodding in feigned agreement. Little did he know, the facade he had so carefully cultivated was about to be shattered beyond repair. We mingled with the crowd, making small talk and accepting well wishes from relatives we hadn't seen in ages. All the while, Jenna and I exchanged covert glances, silently signaling that it was time to put our plan into motion. After the initial greetings had concluded, Jenna cleared her throat, calling for everyone's attention. "If I could have a moment, please," she began, her voice ringing out across the lawn. "There's something important that needs to be addressed." Bryce shot me a quizzical look, but I remained impassive, my expression betraying nothing. "For too long, a grave injustice has been allowed to fester within our family," Jenna continued, her gaze sweeping across the gathered crowd. "An injustice that we can no longer turn a blind eye to." Murmurs of confusion rippled through the crowd, but Jenna pressed on, undeterred. "Bryce Wyatt has been emotionally and psychologically abusing his wife, Marla, for years. Today, we're going to put an end to his cruelty, once and for all." A hush fell over the gathering as Jenna's words sank in. Bryce's face contorted in a mixture of shock and outrage, but before he could interject, Jenna was already unveiling our carefully curated evidence. Audio recordings of Bryce's vicious tirades filled the air, his voice dripping with venom and contempt as he hurled insult after insult at me. Documented journal entries detailing the years of emotional torment were passed around, laying bare the depths of his cruelty. And then, the pièce de résistance, the video footage from our anniversary dinner, capturing Bryce's public humiliation in all its excruciating detail. As the scene played out on the screen, gasps and murmurs of outrage echoed through the crowd. Bryce stood frozen, his mouth agape as the carefully constructed facade he had so meticulously maintained came crashing down around him. "How could you?" My mother's voice cut through the tension, her eyes brimming with tears. "How could you treat my daughter that way?" Bryce stammered, grasping for an excuse, but no words came. He was a cornered animal, his true nature finally exposed for all to see. One by one, family members turned their backs on him, their expressions a mix of disgust and disbelief. Bryce's once charming demeanor had been stripped away, revealing the ugly truth that had been lurking beneath all along. As the weight of his actions bore down upon him, Bryce's veneer of confidence crumbled. He turned to me, his eyes pleading for mercy, for understanding. "Marla, please," he began, but I held up a hand, silencing him. "Enough," I said, my voice steady and unwavering. "You've had your chance to be a decent human being, and you squandered it. Now you're going to face the consequences of your actions." Bryce opened his mouth to protest, but thought better of it. In that moment, he knew he had lost the respect of his family, lost the facade of perfection he had so desperately clung to, lost any semblance of control over the situation. As he slunk away, a broken and defeated man, I felt a surge of vindication wash over me. Justice had been served, and the years of suffering and humiliation had finally been avenged. Jenna pulled me into a fierce embrace, her eyes shining with pride. "You did it, sis," she whispered. "You took that bastard down." I nodded, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. The road ahead would undoubtedly be challenging, but for the first time in years I felt truly free. Free from the shackles of Bryce's emotional abuse, free to reclaim my life and dignity. As the crowd dispersed, offering words of support and encouragement, I knew that this was just the beginning. Bryce's downfall was merely the first step in a journey towards healing and empowerment, and I was ready to embrace it, one step at a time. In the days following the explosive family reunion, the fallout from Bryce's exposure was swift and unrelenting. His life, once so meticulously constructed to project an image of perfection, lay in shattered ruins around him. I, on the other hand, felt a sense of liberation unlike anything I had experienced before. For years I had been shackled by Bryce's emotional abuse, my spirit slowly eroded by his cruelty. But now, with the truth laid bare, I was finally free. The first order of business was securing a divorce. Jenna had put me in touch with a formidable legal team, and within a matter of days the paperwork was filed. Bryce, still reeling from the public humiliation, offered little resistance. "You're making a mistake," he muttered during one of our brief encounters, his eyes downcast and defeated. "Think about what this will do to Derek." I leveled my gaze at him, feeling no shred of sympathy for the man who had tormented me for years. "I am thinking about Derek," I replied, my voice unwavering, "and I'm doing what's best for him, removing him from an environment of toxicity and abuse." Bryce flinched as if he had been struck, but I pressed on, relentless. "You've only got yourself to blame for this, Bryce. Your actions have consequences, whether you choose to acknowledge them or not." With that, I turned and walked away, leaving him to stew in the wreckage of his own making. As news of our impending divorce spread, the backlash against Bryce intensified. Friends and colleagues who had once praised his accomplishments now distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with a man exposed as an emotional abuser. Even Derek, our once doting son, could no longer bring himself to look his father in the eye. "How could you treat Mom like that?" he asked during one of their strained encounters, his voice thick with emotion. "She sacrificed everything for this family, and you just... Words failed him, but his expression spoke volumes. The hero worship he had once held for Bryce had been shattered, replaced by a profound sense of disappointment and betrayal. Bryce, for his part, tried to cling to the tattered remnants of his former life. He lashed out at me, accusing me of turning his own family against him, of poisoning their minds with lies and deceit. "You're a vindictive, spiteful woman," he snarled during one of his tirades. "You'll regret this, Marla. Mark my words." But his threats rang hollow, devoid of the power and menace they once held. I simply stared back at him, unmoved by his pathetic attempts at intimidation. "I don't regret a thing, Bryce," I replied, my voice laced with a steely resolve. "For the first time in years, I'm living in the truth, something you've clearly never been able to handle." His face contorted in a mask of rage, but I had already turned away, leaving him to wallow in his own self-pity and delusion. With each passing day, Bryce's world continued to crumble around him. His once thriving career began to unravel as clients and business partners severed ties, unwilling to be associated with such a tarnished reputation. It was a sight to behold, watching this once proud man brought to his knees by the very demons he had unleashed upon me. And yet, I felt no pity, no shred of remorse for the suffering he now endured. This was justice, pure and simple, a reckoning long overdue. As the divorce proceedings neared their conclusion, I found myself reflecting on the long and arduous journey that had led me to this point. The years of suffering, the constant belittling and emotional abuse, the endless nights spent wondering where the man I had married had gone. But now, as I prepared to embark on a new chapter of my life, those memories seemed to fade into the distance. The shackles that had once bound me had been broken, and I was finally free to spread my wings and soar. Jenna pulled me into a fierce embrace as the final papers were signed, her eyes shining with a mixture of pride and relief. "You did it, sis," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You survived the storm, and you came out stronger on the other side." I nodded, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, I felt a glimmer of hope, a belief that better days lay ahead, free from the toxicity and cruelty that had once defined my existence. As I stepped out into the world, a newfound sense of empowerment coursed through my veins. I was a survivor, a warrior who had faced the darkness head-on and emerged victorious. And Bryce? Well, he was nothing more than a footnote in my story, a mere obstacle that had been overcome, a reminder of the strength and resilience that burned within me. The future was mine to shape, and I intended to seize it with both hands, leaving the pain and suffering of the past far behind me. A new chapter was about to begin, and I couldn't wait to see what it had in store. Chapter 8: A New Beginning. The divorce had been finalized, and with it, a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I was officially free from the shackles of Bryce's emotional abuse, free to start anew and reshape my life on my own terms. Of course, that didn't mean the process was easy. There were still hurdles to overcome, lingering scars from years of torment that would take time to heal. But I was committed to the journey, fueled by a newfound sense of determination and self-worth. The first order of business was securing a favorable settlement, one that would provide me with the financial means to build the life I deserved. Jenna's legal team had proven their mettle, negotiating a generous payout that encompassed a sizable portion of our shared assets. "You earned every penny of this, Marla," Jenna assured me as we reviewed the settlement details. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." I nodded, still somewhat in disbelief that this chapter of my life was truly coming to a close. For so long I had been trapped in a cycle of fear and self-doubt, conditioned by Bryce's emotional manipulations to believe that I deserved nothing better. But now, with the evidence of his cruelty laid bare and the law on my side, I could finally break free from those toxic thought patterns. I was worthy of happiness, of respect, of building a life on my own terms. With the financial security provided by the settlement, I made the decision to invest a portion of the funds into a cause close to my heart, a foundation dedicated to supporting others suffering from the same chronic condition that had once been the catalyst for Bryce's abuse. It was a way for me to turn my pain into purpose, to ensure that no one else would have to endure the isolation and emotional torment that I had faced for so many years. "This is amazing, Mom," Derek said, his eyes shining with pride as we toured the Foundation's newly opened headquarters. I can't think of a better way to help people and raise awareness. I pulled him into a tight embrace, overwhelmed by the surge of emotions welling up within me. For too long, I had shielded Derek from the harsh realities of my marriage, desperate to preserve his image of his father. But now, with the truth laid bare, we were able to forge a deeper connection, built on honesty and mutual respect. "Thank you, sweetheart," I murmured, fighting back tears of joy. "Your support means everything to me." As the foundation took shape and our outreach efforts began in earnest, I found myself bearing witness to the incredible resilience of the human spirit. The stories I encountered, the tales of perseverance in the face of overwhelming adversity, only served to strengthen my own resolve. I was no longer the broken, downtrodden woman who had once cowered in fear of her husband's wrath. I was a survivor, a warrior who had emerged from the ashes of emotional abuse, stronger and more determined than ever before. And Bryce? Well, his fate had been sealed the moment he chose to prioritize his own selfish desires over the well-being of his family. The once powerful businessman had become a pariah, his reputation in tatters and his professional prospects all but non-existent. I caught glimpses of him from time to time, a mere shadow of his former self, disheveled, haunted by the demons of his own making. Our paths would cross, and for a fleeting moment our eyes would meet, a silent acknowledgement of the chasm that now separated us. But I felt no pity, no remorse for the man who had inflicted so much pain and suffering upon me. This was the bed he had made for himself, and now he would lie in it, forever haunted by the consequences of his actions. As for me, I was focused on the future, a future that seemed brighter and more promising with each passing day. The foundation continued to grow, its reach extending to communities across the country, offering solace and support to those who had once felt so alone. And at the center of it all was a woman reborn, a phoenix risen from the ashes of emotional turmoil, spreading her wings and soaring towards new horizons. It was a new beginning, a fresh start that had been hard-won through years of struggle and perseverance. And as I looked ahead, I couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought me to this point. The road had been long and arduous, but in the end, justice had prevailed. I had reclaimed my life, my dignity, and my sense of self-worth, and for that, I would be forever grateful. A new chapter was unfolding, and I intended to embrace it wholeheartedly, leaving the pain and anguish of the past firmly behind me. The future was mine, and I couldn't wait to see what it had in store.